Hello, I'm Paul Weston. With my wife Sally, I own Kadash, aka Kim, a 40-foot sailboat. Last winter we took the boat along the trade wind route from Mediterranean Spain to the West Indies, and I thought I'd share some of the things I'd learned, starting with the section from Spain to the Canary Islands. A list of tips, including anti-Orca measures, is given at the end of the video. This video clip shows Kim running under jib only between Rabat and Puerto Calero in Lanzarote. It was the longest leg of the trip, about 500 miles. Our ultimate aim was to take Kim from Almerimar to the West Indies, specifically Grenada. The northeast trade wind blows very constantly across the Atlantic from about 19 degrees north latitude. The conventional wisdom is that it's best to take advantage of the trade winds and go well south before you go west, rather than heading directly from Gibraltar to the West Indies. The Canary Islands, which are a long way south, make a convenient stopping point, and we chose Puerto Calero in Lanzarote as our layover port. A little bit about us and Kim. I'm an engineer and the author of the Paul Weston Naval Historical Fiction series of novels. My latest book, Diamond Rock, will be available in October 2025. My wife Sally is a retired lawyer. Slightly unusually in our old age, we changed from motor to sail, and Kim's the first sailboat we've owned, apart from a Wayfarer dinghy, for more than 40 years. We cruised extensively in our previous boat, a Mitchell 31C Angler, and in my youth I crossed the Atlantic in a home-designed and built 26-footer, and also did the Azores and back race in my own wooden 26-foot boat. Kim's aluminium, beamy, with a flat bottom. When we bought her 3 years ago, she was rather unfinished, but now she's pretty well worked up. A notable feature is the keel, which is moved vertically by a hydraulic ram and has a heavy lead bulb at the end. With the keel down, Kim draws about 10 feet, which gives her good stability. The triple rudder setup is good for directional stability. She carries about 150 litres of fuel and about 500 litres of fresh water. In addition to the autopilot, she has an Aries wind steering system. She seems strong and is generally well suited to ocean voyaging, except she is a bit lacking in cupboards and lockers. Timing for this trip is important. The hurricane season, June to November, must be avoided, and most people want to maximise their West Indies cruising time. This means that a late November, early December departure from the Canary Islands is often optimum. As well as the hurricane season, there are secondary considerations. An autumn departure from northern Europe, with the likelihood of heavy weather in the western approaches and the Bay of Biscay, is not recommended, and August tends to be windy in the Canary Islands. Our intention was to keep the boat in Puerto Calero for several weeks and get her ready for departure for the West Indies in late November. The first part of our journey was by ferry from Portsmouth to Santander, and then by car, or rather well-laden pickup truck, to southern Spain, lingering over the journey. Almerimar is a pleasant resort, with adequate resources for boat work, and we enjoyed our stay there. We left on 22nd of July 2024 and headed west along the Spanish coast, day tripping to Marina del Este. From there we went due south across the Mediterranean and to Ceuta on the African coast. We went through the Strait of Gibraltar and stopped at Tangier before passing Cape Spartel and heading south down Morocco's Atlantic coast to Rabat. From Rabat we crossed to Lanzarote. I'll discuss these later in detail, but some of the factors to be taken into consideration for Part 1 include timing. Aim to arrive in the Canaries in good time for departure for the Caribbean in late November. Book your marina well in advance. There are few secure anchorages in the Canary Islands. Orcas. We took a route which we hoped would reduce our chance of orca interaction. Strait of Gibraltar. It's important to have the wind and tide with you when you pass through the strait, and to be prepared for heavy traffic. Moroccan coast. There are numerous unlit fishing boats off Morocco's Atlantic coast. They do not use AIS. Fishing floats are very numerous off Rabat. Rabat entrance. You have to work your tides to ensure you cross the bar of Rabat about an hour before high water. Rabat's entrance should not be attempted if the swell is more than about 2 meters high. Avoiding orcas was a priority for us. At the time, Orca interactions seemed more frequent near the Spanish coast, so we decided to cross the Mediterranean before the strait and then hug the Moroccan coast until we were in the Atlantic. We decided to call it Ceuta and then Tangier, or more specifically, Tangier Bay Marina. We headed south from Marina del Este in Spain until we were directly east of Ceuta. This area of the Mediterranean is known as the Alboran Sea, and the relatively cold waters of the Atlantic, pushing through the strait, set up the Alboran Gyre. This is full of wildlife. We saw literally thousands of dolphins, but it also gives rise to fog and currents, which took me unaware after a couple of years in the Mediterranean. When we got near Ceuta, the fog was very thick, and the situation was complicated by the presence of a large number of ships slow steaming or drifting while they awaited orders. We found that the radar and AIS were very useful, as the visibility at times was less than 100 yards. The approach and entrance to Hercules Marina in Ceuta is very straightforward, although you must be aware of ferries and other shipping. The marina is okay, fenced off and close to the city. The city itself is very historic, its strategic location at the end of the strait making it highly desirable and worth fighting over. The Spanish eventually came out on top, and in many respects it's like a European city. There's even a little, and frequent ferries to Gibraltar. The poor visibility at the time of our trip meant that we did not actually see Gibraltar. In order to avoid orcas and to make the most of the currents, we closely hugged the Moroccan shore. This keeps you out of the main shipping lanes. Our destination was Tangier Bay Marina. We had the tide under us and a strong following wind, at times gale force. Although the tide and wind were favourable, the seas off some of the headlands were confused, and it was a rough, though fast ride to Tangier Bay Marina. Be aware of shipping entering and leaving Tangier port. Tangier Bay Marina is large and modern, built around a holiday resort. Booking is highly recommended. Entrance is simple, and it's close to the city. Tie up to the customs pontoon at the entrance to the marina. The boat will be searched, and the whole procedure can be time-consuming. Be patient. I recommend being very careful about drinking water here or eating uncooked food. We had serious stomach problems which were only cured when we bought antibiotics from a pharmacy in Rabat. We were alongside the customs berth at Tangier Bay Marina for 8 a.m. on 31st July, but we didn't clear out until 10, which meant we missed a bit of the west-going tide and had to motor. We kept in close with the land, avoiding the huge volume of shipping further out, and reached Cape Spartel, the northwestern extremity of Africa, by 1 in the afternoon. Although the chart shows overfalls here, the sea was smooth as we turned the corner and headed south towards Rabat, about 120 miles distant, the ship lifting at last to the gentle Atlantic swell. We were on a tight schedule. Rabat, though the capital of Morocco and formerly a Corsair republic and the base of the widely feared Sally Rovers, slavers who once carried off the entire population of Reykjavik, is not really a port. The entrance at the mouth of the Bouregreg River is shallow and completely open to the Atlantic swell. For a safe passage over the bar, the swell should not be more than 2 metres high, and you must cross about an hour before high water, when there's sufficient depth and the tide is flowing in the same direction as the swell. If these two conditions are not met, you must not attempt the entrance, but must stand off and either await the next daylight high tide or go elsewhere. Going elsewhere is a problem, as there are hardly any yacht-friendly harbours on Morocco's Atlantic coast. If you're bound eventually for the Canaries and can't get into Rabat, it's probably best to forget Morocco and head directly for your ultimate destination. To maintain the schedule, we had to average about 4 knots and were forced to motor for most of the night, dodging the numerous unlit fishing boats who universally disdain the use of AIS. We were grateful for the radar we'd bought on eBay and had installed at Al Marimar. Dawn saw us threading our way through the fantastic number of fishing buoys off Rabat, and we arrived at the bar on time in company with a Dutch yacht. We had previously emailed Bouregreg Marina, but had received no reply. It suggested that the marina, if requested by VHF, will send a pilot's rib to guide you over the bar. We called, and eventually a rib arrived, but he cleared off after a few minutes, and after waiting for a while we followed the Dutch yacht across the bar. We had a minimum depth of about 5 metres. From my observations from the land in August 2024, there seemed to be more water close to the southern breakwater. Nevertheless, the swell can pile up unpleasantly. Rabat's entrance is certainly not to be trifled with. When we departed, we were almost caught by a breaker, and a yacht which came into the marina about a week after us, quite a large aluminium boat, had been set on her beam ends. Rabat is certainly worth the difficulty of the entrance. The transition as you enter from the trackless Atlantic into the centre of a capital city is stunning. We tied up to the customs pontoon on the right bank, just below the marina, and then went into the marina itself. The marina is modern, in the centre of a huge tourist resort. The tourists are Moroccan, and there are almost no Westerners. The cafes on the waterfront are very noisy, but everyone is friendly. A modern tram takes you to the centre of the city and to the railway station. You can travel to the opposite bank by ferries rowed by a single man standing to his oars. You can easily imagine a corsair race crossing the Bouregreg in the same manner. The Casbah, the gardens, the Medinas and the Roman and Arab ruins are fabulous. There's about 500 miles of open Atlantic between Rabat and Lanzarote, and when we departed on 16th August we were prepared to go the distance, as the Atlantic coast of Morocco has few ports of refuge. For this leg of the trip, Sally and I were alone on the boat. This was Kim's first ocean crossing, and the first few hours were difficult. Several factors contributed to the tension. The pump on the fuel pontoon was not working, and we had to wait to clear customs while the tide was waiting for nobody. The passage across the bar was unpleasant, and that was followed by an anxious trip through miles of fishing buoys. This all made us tired and susceptible to seasickness. I recovered soon enough, but Sally was only just starting to feel better towards the end of the 4-day trip. We need not have worried about the ship. She performed very well in the strong winds we encountered. The main problem we had to overcome was the mainsail becoming tangled in the rigging, necessitating a struggle of several hours to get it down. The damage it sustained during this incident was to have significant repercussions and gave me an abiding dislike of swept-back spreaders and fully battened mainsails. Our arrival in Puerto Calero coincided with that of a squall, so making fast to the marina pontoon was rather complicated, but we were glad to have completed our first long trip, and we were very pleased with the boat. Puerto Calero is pleasant enough, nicer than Arrecife, though the marina facilities, showers and toilets, are inadequate. There are plenty of restaurants and the walking is good, but a car is required to go shopping. The nearest chandleries are in Arrecife. On September the 9th, 2024, we left Kim in Puerto Calero and flew to Spain, where we collected the pickup and drove back to Santander. Orca notes. We planned our route to avoid reported incidents, crossing the Med well to the east of the strait, and then hugging the Moroccan shore, but we were as prepared as we could be for interactions, with every crew member having an action station. Small aluminium spikes, about 50 of them, were glued onto the rudders. These stayed on the boat for some time, although they have now fallen off. The idea was to make nudging the rudders uncomfortable for the orcas. Sand in the water is said to confuse the orca's echolocation, and we carried building sand, made up in small bags. These were kept to hand in the cockpit for instant readiness. We had a Kango-type percussion drill with an special aluminium head attached to a modified chisel. This was to be applied to the inside of the bilge in the case of an attack. I don't know what effect it would have had on orcas, but it certainly frightened all of the fish when we tried it in a marina. And thanks to our crews, from Almerimar to Ceuta, Martin and Kathy, and from Ceuta to Rabat, Ed and Sicily. Thank you. Here's a summary of tips for the passage to the Canary Islands from the Mediterranean. I hope they'll be useful. I'm Paul Weston, author of Naval Historical Fiction, and my new book will be available in October 2025. Thank you.